Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to review 3 albums from Eric Clapton, which I've called, they're not officially called this, but I've called it the Albert Lee Trilogy, because Albert Lee, the great guitarist, is featured on all 3 albums, and they cover the period 1980 to 83, which probably it's fair to say these albums are a little bit overlooked these days. Well, maybe not by me anyway. And as we'll see, they did reasonably well commercially, but I guess maybe when people talk about Clapton's solo career highlights, these albums aren't immediately mentioned, but they all have considerable merit, and I'm going to talk about each of them. The first one being Just One Night, which was a live album recorded at the Budokan in Tokyo, December 79. And it was about the month before Wings tried to tour Japan, and then Paul got busted for pot, so that's quite interesting. And Eric writes a little piece in March 1980 saying a tour of Japan is something which I always approach with mixed feelings. The audiences are invariably generous and almost over-appreciative, but the pitfalls still exist. Ill health, the feeling of being somewhat of a freak in the tightly closed society they are so proud of. But all in all, it never fails to work out sweetly for all involved. Many thanks to Mr. Udo, Tats and Tack. See you again soon. So I think it was a pretty successful tour, and the production from John Astley is amazing. As live albums go, this is probably one of the best sounding ones. I was actually listening to the Rainbow concert, which was recorded early in January 73, and that's got a decent sound to it, partially because we've got 3 guys on rhythm guitar, Pete Townsend, Ronnie Wood and Eric Clapton. So that's got a really good chunky guitar sound, but this album is maybe it's a little bit over slick in places, and Chris Stainton's keyboard work is maybe a little bit too flashy at times, but this is small criticism because I love most of this album. I particularly love the opener, Tulsa Time. Absolutely storming version of that. Leaves the album version in its wake, far superior. And then the same with Early in the Morning. I love this rendition, and on the album Backless it's a little bit lacking in atmosphere, shall we say, but a really good version. And then they do a superb version of the slow hand classics, Lay Down Sally and Wonderful Tonight, to close out side 1. So it really is a brilliant opening side. And side 2, this tour was to promote Backless. If I Don't Be There by Morning is done really well, probably, if anything, superior to the studio version. Nice to see Albert Lee sharing the vocals on All Our Pastimes, and nice to see him taking the lead vocal on Setting Me Up, which is the Dire Straits track from their first album, which is a really successful version. I think that's, along with Tulsa Time, probably the highlight of the album for me. So that was that. And then in February 81, this album, Another Ticket, came out. And by the way, he's playing with different musicians who he'd worked with before. So after Backless, he dropped Jamie L. Dacre for a while, Carl Raddle, George Terry, Dick Sims, and hired Henry Spinetti on drums, Dave Marquis on bass, Chris Stanton on keyboards, and then they played on the live album, and they played on this one with pictures of them. And then Dave Marquis is on bass as well for both albums, and Albert Lee. So there's a picture of the band. And this album is pretty much overlooked. I always thought this album was a 1980 album, so I'm a bit confused when I read up that it was February 81, because on the album sleeve it says 1980 here, and I notice all the songs are copyrighted 1980, but if it said it was released in February 81, I guess it was. Or maybe it was originally slated for late 80 and then delayed. It was recorded in Compass Point Studios in Nassau, Bahamas, the famous recording studios where AC/DC recorded Back in Black. Talking Heads recorded, I think it was bits of Remain in Light, and maybe a couple of others. Ringo recorded bits of Stop and Smell the Roses. And it looks like Ringo might have been in Nassau around about the same time in late 1980, if I'm not sure what months Eric was in the studio. It's not documented, or not that I could find. But this is a really underlooked album, and I love the opening track, Something Special. I think the title track's a pretty decent ballad. Hold Me Lord is a good country faster number. Floating Bridge, a cover of a song by Sleepy John Estes, who he would cover also on the next album. Catch Me If You Can, probably the highlight of the album for me. Brilliant instrumental section at the end, which goes on about 3 or 4 minutes. So yeah, pretty damn consistent. Not as good as Backless in my opinion. Well produced by Tom Dowd, but you know, better than most of the latter-day Clapton albums we've had since Money and Cigarettes, which I think have slowly declined in quality, with a few exceptions, of course. I think Journeyman is decent. But anyway, this was the next album, Money and Cigarettes. Good cover. Nice protective inner sleeve here with the words. By the way, I just wanted to show you the inner sleeve of Just One Night, because this is a blast from the past. You remember when inner sleeves used to say this: home taping is killing music, and it's illegal. In an attempt to stop people taping stuff off the radio, which was all the rage at the time, and I must admit I was as guilty as the next guy of doing that, although I did buy records as well, so I guess I was putting some money into the pockets of the artists, not ripping them off completely. Like some people just refuse to buy anything, and a bit like what happened with the internet, when people could download for free. These days it's not so easy to do, but similar type of thing. I guess when tapes came in, that was the beginning of the end. Well, not the end, but you know what I mean. So on this album we've got slightly different musicians. One of the internet articles said rather dramatically he'd fired the band, but I don't think he really fired them, because Chris Stainton returned for the tour of Money and Cigarettes, and Jamie Oldacre, who he'd allegedly fired after Backless, was back drumming for him on the tour as well, because I saw the Money and Cigarettes tour in St Austell, Cornwall Coliseum, on my birthday, May the 13th, 1983. And the band for that was Chris Stainton on keyboards, Jamie Oldacre on drums, Donald Duck Dunn on bass, who's on this album, Albert Lee on guitar with Eric. And it was a great band, and I was really praying Albert would do Setting Me Up, but they didn't. But it was a good concert. So this album is pretty damn good, especially side one. Opens with Sleepy John Estes, Everybody Ought to Make a Change, which also Eric opened the Arms concert at the Albert Hall in 1983, which was a big charity affair, featuring Jimmy Page, Steve Winwood, Ronnie Lane, Eric, others. I can't remember. Charlie Watts, I think was there, and Ronnie. So he opened the concert with that, I seem to remember, and it opens the album really well. The Shape You're In, probably my favourite track on the album. Although he's being a bit harsh on Patty. He's basically saying, you started early and we've got all night. You can tell by the smell that you've had a few, but basically going on about her drinking. But I think that was a bit hypocritical coming from Eric, because although I read one report that he'd given up booze for this album, I don't think that's 100% true. I think he was in pretty bad shape for a couple more years anyway. But either way, I think it was a bit of a cruel lyric aimed at Patty. Ain't Going Down is probably the other outstanding track on the album. Great guitar work on both of these tracks from Eric and Albert Lee, trading solos. And the first single from the album was I've Got a Rock and Roll Heart, which was a cover and was quite nice. Nice guitar work. And Man Overboard is a sort of run-of-the-mill Clapton song, pretty catchy, nothing special. And then side two is considerably weaker, by comparison, although it opens with a strong ballad with much nicer words about Patty. And then Man in Love is kind of so-so. Crosscut Saw is quite a nice sounding cover of an R.G. Ford song. Slow Down Linda is pretty dismissible, and Crazy Country Hop is not a very good way to close the album. So I was listening to this the other day, and yeah, side one is considerably better than side two. Again, it's produced by Tom Dowd, and it's probably I don't think he's done an album better than Money and Cigarettes in his career since. So this is probably that period from Cream up until Money and Cigarettes is probably the period I return to most. So that was the Albert Lee Trilogy, as I called it. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.